Lovely. Okay, welcome to today's webinar, Raise Your Money Vibration. I'm really excited that you're here actually, because money is something that, I don't know, it's one of those funny topics where it either completely freaks people out or they're really engaged and really excited about it because we know that it can do so many things. So the way this came about actually was I actually was delivering another workshop, and as we were going through it, I was like, I feel like the energy in the world in general feels really heavy, and there's just so many things feel like we're walking through mud, and especially at the moment, the way interest rates and the economy and all of that, and a lot of it's in the news. I mean, definitely there is reality to it, of course, but there's a certain level of energy. I feel like we just need to raise it up a bit, and we can keep that a lot more raised when there's a collective, when we're all aware of this, when we can all work together to raise the energy and hold that consciousness together. So I'll launch into me and I might just move this down a bit here so we can all see. So a little bit about myself. My name is Alpha. That is actually my name, because I sometimes get asked, "Oh, did you change your name to Alpha?" I was like, "No, that's my real name." I can thank my mother for that one. And I work with female small business owners to help them connect their mindset in relation to money and also their business and personal finances. I'm very much an integrator, and it's something that's kind of developed over time where I'm a connector. I like connecting people. I like integrating ideas, and I really want to make sure there's alignment that people experience through all of that as well. So it's quite an important part of what I do and how I do it. So that's basically what I do. Now, a little bit about my history. I started out as a corporate tax accountant. I did not grow up thinking, "Oh, this is what I want to do with my life. I want to be a corporate tax accountant." I love traveling. So I was like, "Oh, I want to do something that allows me to travel the world." One of my cousins suggested I be a photographer for National Geographic. A slightly unrealistic goal for that one. I do like photography, but I was never that passionate about it. So I remember sitting in grade 12, I had the QTAC form. So that was the form you filled out to apply to a university, because that is the one thing that was drummed into me. On both sides, my parents are immigrants. And especially on my mum's side, it was always drummed into me: education, formal education. You get a good education, you get a good job, you earn good money, and you follow the path. So I was like, I have to go to uni, but I don't know what I want to do. I love traveling. And there was a course that was called Bachelor of International Business. And I was like, I'll do that. I then ended up having to add on a commerce degree and a marketing major. And then I finished uni and I could not find a job anywhere. This is one of those classic, you're trying to push and make something happen and it just didn't happen. But fast forward 10 years, I got offered a marketing manager role for a small consultancy I was working with. And I remember sitting there when they offered me the job and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. I don't know how many applications I put in to try and get a marketing assistant role 10 years ago. And now I'm getting offered a marketing manager role. Anyway, but prior to all of that, I studied accounting because I thought, oh, well, the world always needs accountants. And off I went down the path of working with they were big five firm back then. Now there's four. And I was absolutely miserable for the 2 years that I spent in that big company. I really didn't enjoy it. I loved the people and I loved working with clients, but I didn't like the very legal nitty gritty of corporate tax law. So I started to move and take some risks around all of that, and which turned out to pay off, because I've ended up in a completely different path, which I absolutely love. And I do now get to travel, but I do it for pleasure, sometimes for business, but mainly for pleasure. And that's my little girl when we were at Uluru. She was 6 then, she's now 8. And she completely changed my world as well, in terms of what I see as important and the vision that I have for life and what I do and how I do it. So now, in terms of what we're going to cover today, we're going to look at what money actually is and why having a healthy money mindset is important to the elevation of that energy. Then we're going to look at money beliefs, because these are a big one. What we believe about money is not actually really true, but it feels true, which means it pretty much is true. So then we'll also look at how to link your beliefs to the habits that you have around money, because what we do on a regular basis and the repetition creates these neural pathways that implant themselves, that just stay there unless we become conscious of them and start to make some changes around it. And then we'll look at how some of them may be holding you back and then what to do about it. Before I launch into all of that, though, I just want to take us on a little bit of a journey of where we would like to head in terms of what happens once we start to elevate that energy and the abundance that we can attract. And I'm a very, partly my training, I suppose, but I'm a very pragmatic person. So when I talk about abundance and attracting abundance, it's not just thinking the thoughts and wishing them true. It's about actually doing something. And I like knowing the tasks that I can do, having steps to follow, and being able to measure from here to there. There's a really good book by Dan Sullivan called The Gap and the Gain. I'm sure some of you watching this have heard of it. If you haven't, I highly suggest you read it, because it's very much about looking at the progress that we're making and being able to not necessarily measure that in terms of metrics, although when it comes to money, there's a metric involved. But it's also then being able to look at the progress that we make along the way, both as a human being, as well as a business owner, as well as a parent, and in so many different facets of our life. Because women, we are multifaceted. We carry so many roles and so many responsibilities that go with those roles that it really impacts then how we actually do the things that we do, and it comes from a different place. And because of our minds are all over the place, it also means we need to focus in on what it is that we want and be super duper clear. So we go from overwhelm. Once we get that clarity, we can move from overwhelm into confidence. I don't know about you, but even just the word confidence just feels so much better. I can sit straighter, whereas overwhelm, I just want to slouch into my chair and just kind of, oh. And even procrastination. Oh my goodness, procrastination happens so much when we're not clear. And the opposite of that becomes action. We get clear on what we want to do and we take the action, and then that action leads to the next one, leads to the next one. So it's a step-by-step progress, and that creates a juggernaut of momentum that goes with it. Whereas procrastination, we just kind of stay stuck. So we'll help move from one to the other today. Indecision. I see this a lot. Like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. We are approached with so much these days. And that's one of the reasons why I use the word simple in my business quite a lot, because let's break it back down to simplicity, to basics, the simplicity of energy, how we actually show up in the world, how we feel, the way we plant our feet on the ground when we first wake up in the morning. The habits of what we do are important, but making them simple so that they're easy to do and that we conceive a benefit out of them as well. So that when it comes to the point of making decisions, we're like, oh yeah, of course, this is clear, or I feel this, I can do this. We just instinctively know, so that we can then decide it's aligned with our values, our vision, all sorts of things, and off we go. And we can put the boundaries in place when things come at us, because they will. There's so much that comes at us. Social media, TV, streaming, our kids, even the stuff sometimes my daughter comes home with. And I'm like, where did you hear that? Didn't even know you knew that. So it comes from every direction. Fear of failure. This is a really big one. And I have to admit, I used to be much of a perfectionist in my younger years, because I had this fear of not doing something correctly or failing publicly, and then I realized, probably not really until I had my daughter, so I was in my mid-30s by this point, no one's really watching. They're all concerned about themselves and whether or not they're failing and doing it publicly. And the thing is, you learn so much from failure. I've made, I don't know how many mistakes, or not even just mistakes, but things that just didn't work. And you're like, okay, well, that didn't work. Let's try this. And you move on from one thing to the next, rather than seeing it as this, like these sort of cement shoes of failure where that's it, I'm stuck, I can't move. We're shifting that concept around and look at it as learning. And the faster you fail, the faster you learn. And it just, again, compounds. When it comes to money, compounding is the sweet spot. So I'm not going to go too much into the specifics of money, but definitely the energy around compounding, that is part of this as well. And then frustration. We want to go from feeling frustrated and just that feeling inside you, it just isn't nice, to a sense of peace and happiness, where we can go, this is nice. This feels good. This is aligned. I've found my people. I've found what I'm meant to be doing. And sometimes you'll be like, okay, I'm not entirely sure about everything, but I'm sure at least about sure enough about the next steps that I can take. And then I know, I have faith that what will come out of that, I will then know what to do next. This is something, and I'm sure there are other versions of this around, but many years ago, I was at a John DeMartini seminar, And he said this. I don't remember anything else he said because he talks really quickly. And some of it sticks and some of it doesn't, just like anything. But this stuck with me. And it was at least 15 years ago. So it really implanted in my brain that fear is future events appearing real. And I use this also with my daughter as well, because I'm like, we're scared or we have fear about something that hasn't even happened, that may never happen. And then we have to have faith that goes with this to know that even if the thing that we're fearing does happen, we'll know what to do and we'll be able to work our way through it. But there are tools and strategies that we can use to help us with that too. So I just wanted to frame this as part of the discussion for today, because fear is something that holds a lot of us back in our businesses. There's a risk factor, and we all have our own risk profile as well, especially when it comes to money. But it's understanding what it is and identifying whether or not it's true sort of consideration and fear, or if it's actually something that's really going to hurt us. So being able to discern that difference. Another message I want to implant in us before we get too much into the detail, which is coming very shortly, is what we focus on expands. So just think to yourself, if you think about money in a negative way, something that is hard, it's just, you can't find it. There's a limit, especially for women or, in this industry or whatever it happens to be, the current economic climate. If this is even my facial expression changes, the scowl that's there, we're never really going to be able to move beyond that until we focus in a different way. And that's not just to say that we think good thoughts and that will happen. We've got to start with the thoughts and start with the focus, and then put in action steps in place to be able to actually make that a reality. So think about what you're focusing on at the moment in relation to money, or in anything really, but we're talking about money today. And is it really serving you? Is it making you feel good? Is it advancing you towards where you want to go? So I'll leave you with that thought, and then we'll talk about what money actually is. So when I hear so many things, and I used to be like this as well. Like, I used to worry about it. I mean, I grew up with, we were a bit of a feast and famine quite a lot. Like, my dad had his own business. He used to get paid in cash quite a lot. And it was always, oh, wow, this is great. But it would disappear. Then there'd be decisions made about buying property, and then he'd make money or lose money. The bills, some months they could be paid, some months they couldn't. So there was always it wasn't ease that I felt around money. So I became like a squirrel up with my acorns. I was like, I'm not spending. I don't want to spend any money. But that's also quite limiting too, because sometimes you need to spend or invest in order to grow. So I've had to learn how to deal with the concept of money over time. And as I was preparing for this, I thought, I'm just going to go and have a look at what's written about money now, because it does change over time. I mean, there's the things like it's a unit of exchange. Yes, okay, very theoretical. A widely accepted means of payment, which is true. If you think back in the day, though, bartering was a lot more common. So we didn't have money to assign value to anything. So people would, you'd have a blacksmith would make something, and then the baker might make something, and then they would swap, because he's like, well, I need bread. And like, well, I need what you're making. Let's do a deal and swap it over. And then at some point we transitioned over where that exchange of value between goods wasn't really working. So we then used money. And especially as humans started to be able to move a lot more widely, with the invention of the cart and then eventually the car, it meant that we couldn't really necessarily carry our goods with us everywhere. And we went from being less nomadic to, we're in certain civilizations as well. And we had cities and towns and everything that grew up around that. We had to find another way to exchange value for value. And money started to come into that. And it used to be like genuine things like gold and silver. Now it's quite often numbers on a screen. So that when it comes to numbers on a screen dictating how we feel as a human being and the worth we have, this is where I really, really start to get angry. Is probably the wrong word, but I start to get very passionate about it. So it's like, just because the numbers on the screen are there or they're saying something does not mean that is your worth as a human being. So I've got there. It does not judge your worth. Money is not, it's a tool. It's a number. It's a thing, like it's notes or coins. It's not judging who you are and how good you are as a person. So it's an energy, and it's a tool that we use. And the Reserve Bank even says, I found this quite interesting. It says money derives its value from the trust people place in it. I was like, okay, trust is an interesting word to assign with money, especially humans trusting that it has value. But it's a human construct. So just have a think about that. This is what money is. It's not anything that's going to go, okay, you know what? You've got this much, you're worth this much. You've got this much, you're worth that much. That's not what this is about. It's about something bigger than that. So when we then look at money mindset, and mindset itself, it's a term that's bandied around a lot these days, especially money mindset. So I wanted to break it down a little bit because we'll build on this in terms of how we then raise our energy vibration in relation to money as well. So it starts from the beliefs, which are often like the thoughts that we have. And we all have the stories and the thoughts that have happened from childhood. I even just mentioned a few of them there. There's a bit of scarcity on it. And some of the phrases that we hear as children, money doesn't grow on trees. Okay, no, if we're logically looking at a tree, no, money doesn't grow on a tree. But what we're basically hearing is money is scarce. It isn't just abundant and there for the taking. But if we believe the opposite of that, that it is abundant and just there for the taking, we still need to apply a certain level of our real life environment as well. So how do we balance those two? Partly it's with our experiences. And we will often have experiences that validate our beliefs because it's that self-fulfilling prophecy concept. What we see expands what we focus on, and then what we experience validates our beliefs. So we're like, well, those are true. So I'll go into that in a little bit more detail in a moment. And then we have our habits. And these are the behaviors that we do repeatedly, which those neural pathways get created with to then validate the beliefs, which then create the experiences, which then we build our habits on. So we can see how this starts to form, and what we need to do, this is the formation cycle, as I call it, we need to interrupt this. Now, if anyone's read James Clear's Atomic Habits, you'll be familiar with some of this because he talks about it in a similar kind of way, slightly different languaging, but it essentially means the same thing. I remember when I first saw this, I was just like, oh my gosh, I get this. This just makes sense. So our sense of self, or our identity, that's then linked with our beliefs. And then our behaviors that get repeated again and again form our habits. And we will often do them unconsciously, which is why we will do what we've always done. We'll see what our parents did. For starters, as teenagers or young adults, we either completely rebel and do the opposite because it's what they did, so we don't want to do that, or we just keep continuing the same patterns of behavior. And before we know it, we're in our mid-20s and we're like, oh, wow, what's happened? Why am I in this situation? Or we've gone and done things a certain way, and then our life gets interrupted by life or situations or health or something else. We might have an epiphany, or a tragedy might happen, or we start to get a bit older and realize there's some trauma that is there that we haven't dealt with. And that's impacting us in the present moment. So we have all of these things as human beings, which just creates a layer of complexity that we've then got to deal with. And life will generally throw these things up at you when you the least expect it, but it's usually when you're ready to deal with it. I know that sometimes feels hard, but you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this has happened right now. Things happened when they're meant to happen to help you progress and then elevate to the next level. So again, having that trust and that faith that this is the right thing at the right moment is important, because you then move through it from a position of empowerment rather than a position of victimization. And we definitely do not want to be in that place of victimization, because that is destructive, and talk about inertia. So what do we then do with this? Let's look at our beliefs. So our beliefs start with our identity, and I've got a thumb or a fingerprint there because it's as unique as we are. Then we have our stories, which repeatedly validate this, and then the perceptions that we have around those. So perception is reality, really. So the way we perceive something is how it really is. Someone can be beautiful and slim, but if they look in the mirror and see somebody who's overweight, it really doesn't matter what anybody else sees. What matters is what they see. And when you also overlay this with the concept that our brains are wired for survival, anytime something that happens that looks like it's going to change or impact our day-to-day norms, our whole body will go into a certain level of stress to go, oh, what is this? Is this dangerous? Friend or foe? Do we need to fight or flight? Like, what are we doing here? Which is why it's so hard to change things all at once, like to completely quit smoking, or to completely, cut out sugar, helpful, like with just totally cold turkey is really, really hard, because our body literally goes into shock. If we're in an accident, our brains will actually shut down to protect us from any kind of impact and the trauma that will go with that. So once we understand that anytime we want to make a change in our lives, it starts with awareness that all of this is happening, but it also doesn't mean that we're going to have to change it all straight away. So we'll start with the thought patterns and the awareness of it first. So beliefs. So when we look at the types of beliefs that we all have them. So when it comes to values, we can also be thinking about things about being present. I know myself, quite often it's that anytime I read things was like, put your phone away, or, like when I'm sitting with my daughter, sometimes I'm going, oh my goodness, I'm a lot better at it now. But when, in the early days, and I would be checking my phone quite a lot. And one time she said to me, she's like, Mama, can you put your phone away? And as soon as she said that, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, oh my goodness, talk about not being present. She's not going to be this age forever. I want to be totally present. So now whenever we play, quite often I was like, I don't even know where my phone is. Like, it's somewhere. And then I get back to it and there's like all these messages and missed things. I was like, oh, well, it'll get to them. Setting boundaries, and that's part of what that is too, is setting boundaries. Having things in place that we can relate to in terms of money. So we can put in terms of income here, we've got ways to increase our income. We can figure out what our beliefs are in relation to that. Do we think we have a ceiling on making money? I hear this a lot. They're like, I've never been able to break the 6-figure barrier. And I used to believe that as well. But as soon as you start to challenge the belief and go, okay, well, what if it was possible? What if I was the sort of person who could make 6 figures or more? What would that look like? What would I have to believe about myself? And you'd be like, Sometimes even just the questioning, the curiosity of that starts to break away all of the bits that are in our minds about whether or not this is even possible. You question that possibility, and new questions will start to come, and they'll fire different neurons in your brain. And be like, right, okay, this could be possible, but what would I need to do? Maybe I need to spend a little less. And then I can look at ways to increase my income. I can start to take on some more private clients. I can look at my rates. I can look at my services. Maybe I can offer some digital products. What else can I do in order to elevate the level of income that I'm offering? And it might also be, let's do some more networking, or let's figure out other ways to build the brand and get clear on what the brand is. And then it's easy to talk to your target market once you know what your brand really is. And then you've got your spending side of it as well. So looking at whether or not, like I look at this quite regularly, because I don't like waste. So when I have a couple of apps, I used to have these 2 apps in particular. One did the same thing as the other, but something slightly different as well. And another one did something the same, but slightly different to that. Anyway, in the end, I was like, what do I really need? Do I really need 2? Because it's also harder to manage too. It's not just even the cost, it's the complexity that goes with it. So then you start to look at that. When I was pregnant with my daughter, I was self-employed. And I didn't know when I was going to work again, because I had no idea what being a mother would be like, and if I could still do what I was doing and the way I was doing it. So I went through all of my expenses, and I was amazed at how much money I managed to save. And I already thought I was pretty streamlined. So it's always good to do those sort of reviews. But then the beliefs that we have about whether or not we're even capable of doing that, calling up an insurance company and negotiating your premium. I do that every year. Before, probably maybe 10 years ago, I would have like petrified me, the idea of calling up and asking for a better rate. I'd been like, oh my gosh, no, you don't do that. Well, yeah, you do. And they're prepared for it too. If you don't ask, you don't get. So it's what do we believe about ourselves and the type of person that we are? And you can still do it from a place of alignment. It's not like I'm ringing up and demanding to speak to the manager and being very, horrible and overly demanding. Like, I'm doing it in a nice way. It's like, so I see you're offering discounts to new customers. I've been a loyal customer for 5 years. What kind of deal could you do for me? And you can even be a little bit cheeky about it, but you do it aligned with who you are and your personality too. But it's just starting to think a bit differently. And then with the thoughts, then also the energy. And you can do them, you can either do the energy first and the thinking and the actions, or you can just leap and take an action, and then your beliefs will come. Quite often it's not that linear. It can be very circular. And then saving. The amount of times I hear from people, oh, I'm just not good at saving. It's like, well, if you're telling yourself you're not, then you're not really. Do you want to be good at saving? Oh, yes, yes, yes. So, okay. So what would you need to do in order to do that? So it's, again, it starts with the questions, and then we start to incrementally change the beliefs that we have about who we think we are. Are we a saver or not a saver? We might have been told back when we were a child, oh, you always spend all your pocket money. I always have to be conscious. My daughter spends her pocket money, but I don't want to keep reinforcing to her that she's always spending her pocket money. It's that there is a delicate balance with that, of course, because there is a certain reality to it. And I was like, so how about you consider, you might want something else. Do you want to save some of it? So we've built in a save jar as well as a spend. So it's creating those boundaries. So you can be good at saving, but do you, or even not good at saving, depending, but do you even have a purpose for what you're doing it for? It's often very difficult if you don't have a purpose. Investing is a very similar thing. As women in particular, oh my goodness, I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole, but I do want to just mention one thing. When it comes to investing and expanding our wealth, men get a very different message to women. They get the whole, look into shares and try crypto and start a business. And it's all very expansive and a certain level of risk. Women is, you've got to cut out your daily latte, and you're going to need to budget and find some, coupons or discounts and things, and start to get really savvy about your spending and your budgeting. And I was like, just what is that? Why can't women do all the investing and not necessarily crypto? Because I personally I'm not a fan, but it might be someone's thing. It could be, investing in property or starting a business, whatever it happens to be. That messaging is really important, and becoming educated on it as well. But it doesn't necessarily mean you need to be an expert. You just need to be educated and informed about what you're doing before launching in with it. And then legacy, we are also, all of us are really, well, I shouldn't say, I'm generalizing here, but a lot of us are really scared about putting those sort of estate plans and things in place. Extremely important, especially if you have a business, you've got children, you've got any kind of assets. You need to be able to have some protection around that, and also some clarity over what's meant to happen, when, and to whom. I'm not going to go down that path either, but just something to think about, and the beliefs that we have around why we're not doing it. So how to rewire these then becomes the next step. If you have pen and paper, you can write these down. So, you write down the questions, or like you said, you can look through the slides again later, but write down what you believe. You can start with 3. 3 isn't too many. What you believe about yourself, especially in relation to money, that isn't serving you. So it might be that you don't think you can invest, or that you don't have a brain for numbers, or, it's just too hard, or it's too confusing, whatever story you're telling yourself, write it down. Then answer, why do you believe that to be true? Because where it comes from is often complete nonsense. Like some of the stuff that we get told as children that we take on, and we believe it forever unless we question it, or unless somebody reflects it back on us and we go, because I quite often will have clients who come to me and they'll say something like, oh, I've never been good at maths. And then we'll look through what they've done in their life and the decisions they've made. And I was like, you've been pretty good with your numbers and pretty good with your decisions. Why do you think you're not good at maths? And then there's usually this break where they're like, I don't know. But we're so keen to hang on to the familiarity of the prior beliefs, because they're familiar and they've served us for many years, or they've kept us safe, or they've kept us in whatever state we're in that's familiar. And we've just kept going that way. We've just continued to function that way. And then how are you going to reframe it? So, and with this, I've got the love heart there deliberately, because being kind with yourself and not like beating yourself up about how could I believe this for so many, that's not the point of this. The point of it is to raise or elevate the energy to the point where we're coming from a place of love, self-love, because everything starts with us. We're trained also in our society that the concept of self is selfish. We're self-absorbed. It's very bad to consider the self first. Ultimately, though, we're the ones who make things happen. So being self-deprecating is not going to get you anywhere, but self-love and being able to expand that out, because love is expansive. I remember I learned this lesson, it was many years ago now, when I'm an only child. I was quite close to my cousin growing up, and because she was more or less an only child as well. And when she had her first child, and I'm her godmother, and I visited a lot because they don't live in Brisbane. And then she had some half siblings that came into her life, like 4 of them. So there's like numbers there. And I remember being there with them all together thinking, wow, I feel really outnumbered here. And I felt a bit jealous, to be honest. And then I'm looking at this little girl and thinking, wow, she now has 4 more people to love her. Love just expands. And when you have your own, like when I had my own daughter, I really got that even more. I was like the concept of that. So if we can come at this from a place of love and expand that energy out, including loving money and what it can do for us and our lives and the choices we get to make and the people we get to help and serve, it just comes from such a different place. And doing it, and that also then gives you energy too. It helps you through times when things do get hard, because things will. It just is inevitable. Life isn't always a bed of roses. And quite often the inspiration that comes out of those hard times is what will then accelerate our journey as well. So rather than avoiding the tough times and the possibility of failure, lean into it and come from a place of love and bring that energy. So then we come to habits. I won't go too much into the mechanics of habits, because there's a lot's been written about it, and there's a whole another level we could go with it. But ultimately, it's repetitive behavior. So if you think of the stuff that we do every day, we don't think about it often because it's in our neural pathways. We do it. We breathe. We get out of bed. We stand on our feet. We brush our teeth. Whatever our routines are. And that's actually a good thing, because the more we can get into habits, the more our brain is freed up to focus on the tasks where we really need to concentrate. And sometimes what we're doing here, when we're starting to reframe our beliefs and our habits and the way we see money and the energy around it, will take a bit of effort to start with, to embed the habit and the level of repetition that we need to do it, to embed it in our psyche and our body and the energy that we feel all around us. So when we look at it in terms of behaviors and tasks and thoughts, how the amount of times that we repeat it is what matters. There's always this concept of, it takes 30 days to replace a habit. And I remember reading that once, just going, okay, 30 days, right. And then when I read James Clear's book, it's like, oh, it's actually the number of repetition. And I still remember when it comes to getting good at something, or even inventing something like Thomas Edison, I think it took him like 10,000 goes before he actually got the light bulb. And it's like, can you imagine if he'd given up at 900? Like, it would never have got there. So it's the repetition and the success that comes from it. And when it comes to money habits, for business, for your mindset, as well as for your business itself, it's extremely important to set up habits. And you can put time in your calendar even. That's how pragmatic you can get with these. And there's the energetics that leads into the habit that gives you the result as well, which then leapfrogs on itself over and over. So paying super, that's me with my really pragmatic accountant brain on. It's very important to pay yourself both your profit and your super, and making sure you understand the difference between revenue and profit. And there's a few other ones in there as well. And when it comes to the mindset side, languaging, this is very important as well. But we were talking about that with the beliefs and the stories and the way you communicate to yourself, the things that you say to yourself. Extremely important to monitor that and make sure that it's not going to your detriment. The assumptions that we make. There's another really good book, Don Miguel Ruiz, The 4 Agreements. And I love, don't make assumptions is one of the keys in that. And it's a really big one for living my life. Already every week almost, I can think of something where someone's made an assumption, or I've made an assumption. You're like, I see where this communication is just like crossed over. And if we're not communicating clearly with ourselves about what we want, and this is why goal setting is quite important as well, and having a clear vision that's aligned with it all, and you can start to see where all of this starts to really connect, having that vision, the values, the beliefs, the habits, and everything aligned, and the languaging, everything then just flows from that. And then the goals we have to tactically create that vision that we want happens a lot more easily. There's a flow. So assumptions form part of that. So trying to let go of that human construct where we will assume what someone's thinking, because that often is holding us back too. It's that fear of failure, that fear in general. We're making an assumption about what's going to happen. Might not actually be true. And then replacing the habits, again, make a list. You can't change something unless you know what it is. So you start with your list, and you can prioritize it if you want to, unless you're really clear on what, say, your top 3 are, because there'll be many. The older we get, the more habits that we have, and not all of them are going to necessarily be serving us. And then consistency and discipline is, and that is really the cornerstone of money as well. Being consistent and disciplined about saving, about investing, doing what we say we're going to do, just generally putting those boundaries in place, and being true to who we are, and connecting with our vision as we're doing it, because it makes being consistent a lot easier then. So this is just reinforcing the steps. It's about how we go about doing things bit by bit, and not necessarily focus so much on the goal that we lose sight of all the steps in the process. And sometimes the steps may need to change, because as we grow and we evolve and our energetics changes, we start to expand in our vision as well. And so our vision may change slightly, and then the goals will change as well. So we don't want to be so wedded to the goal that we're like, this is the plan. We've got to stick to the plan. We're not deviating. This is the time for flexibility, the kindness factor, the allowing the energy to flow, because energy is not necessarily just going to go like this. It's not going to go just like this. It's everywhere. And if we're in the flow, it just kind of goes with it. So that's why those stepping stones are a little bit askew. But it's then also focusing on all that progress that we've made. So I really encourage you to look back at the decisions you've made and the things that you've done in your life, and you've probably come a lot further than you really believe, than you realize that you have. And that ceiling you thought was there is actually your floor now. And then you'd be like, oh, okay, so I'm striving for something else. And it's that acknowledgement of it rather than that constant seeking and striving. It's a little bit like what I said before. I was trying so hard to get this marketing job, and then there it is, literally handed to me 10 years later. And I ended up with a marketing assistant then working for me, who was just, she was just so grateful and happy. And it was such a lovely experience being there. So it's just, that really, really reinforced to me the power of being in flow and just taking and accepting. That's not to say that you take everything that's thrown at you. Again, there's a level of discernment and boundaries that go with this as well. This is another one that I wanted to say, because I've heard this a number of times over the last sort of 6 months or so, and it's really, you only fail if you quit. So when it comes to whatever it is that you really want, and even to the point of raising your energy, because it's not like you think it and it happens. It does take some work, and it takes time for things to integrate. So there'll be a lot of seeds planted today that you'll be like, and it'll be mulling around in your head. And then you might even wake up in a couple of days and go, so this, maybe I should be doing this, or maybe that's why that happened. Things start to make sense once you go down this path and you start to question it. There's that curiosity from a place of love and kindness. So when you need to rewire your habits and your beliefs, you also need to just believe that you can make those changes, and to just keep going without focusing on the fact that you could fail. Because if you stop, you will. That is a certainty, and there aren't that many certainties in life. So you just keep on going. Life is a journey. That said, I would like to present the Enriched Life Club. So if you like what I've gone through today, something I created, it was interesting actually, because I belong to a number of masterminds, and I know some of you on here belong to the same masterminds I'm in, and I wanted to create a space that allowed us to go into the space of personal finances, personal development, mindset, business finances, the pragmatic as well as the spiritual too. You probably picked that up. I'm quite a spiritual person. I do believe that there's ways that we can elevate our energy by connecting within. And it's not just the personal development stuff. There's also, there's more of an intrinsic side to this, and our humanness that we connect, and that desire to connect and support. And that's what I've created with the Enriched Life Club. There's more information on the website if you want to have a look. But just to give you a bit of an idea of what's included. So we do one-on-one discovery calls to start with, so that it helps you understand how it all works, and so that you know where to find things, make sure that you've got logins, all of that, and also where to look for what you need, so you can get started straight away. And if there's a specific resource that's in there that will help you immediately, I'll direct you straight to that, so that you can start to get value out of it immediately. There'll be bonus expert sessions. I'm still trying to find a zero expert to come in and talk about it. There's tools and resources. We do some mindset accountability as well. And I want to start putting in an accountability call too, just to try and help create some structure and consistency around how everyone operates. There's workbooks, materials, all sorts of things. So there's quite a bit in there. And I've deliberately tried to keep the value affordable. It is going to be going up. So I have done this is like my second kind of, I guess, launch, so to speak. And my introductory period of 6 months is coming to an end at the end of October. So if you did want to jump in, now is the ideal time. The price will be going up. There is no lock-in contract. You can come in, you can stay, you can play, you can get what you need from it for however many months, but you're welcome to stay as long as you like. I wanted to make it as flexible as possible because I realize life changes, you need things and you don't, and it all just comes and sort of goes full circle. There are some bonuses at the moment. One is a one-on-one consulting session with myself, where we start to delve into the detail of your finances for your business and personal life and see how they connect and where there's maybe some opportunities for improvement. And then there's also financial wellness. I have a series of checklists that basically just helps you get on top of your finances, and it just shows you, guides you through what to do depending on how much time in a day you've got. They're only available for the next 24 hours. And that's the Enriched Life Club. Now, does anybody have any questions? So this is where you get to ask me anything. I don't know if I need to unmute anyone, or you're welcome to unmute yourself if you would like. I know I've gone through a fair amount there. I'm just going to put the camera back on so I can see people. Was that helpful? Some nods. Okay. If you have any questions, if you don't feel comfortable asking them in a group environment, you can feel free to DM me later, and we can always have more of a chat. But yes, there's a lot to money and the energetics and the mindset and even the pragmatic side, which is why I like to bring it all together. I don't feel like you can have one without the other. Mia, go for it.
Yeah, I have a question. So what if your money beliefs and your mindset is just very different from your partner in terms of your priorities and your decision making? You're just on different pages when it comes to their beliefs and their stories.
Yeah, that's a really good question. It happens a lot, and it's really interesting because there's a lot of belief around someone's a spender, someone's a saver, and I do see that quite a bit. And I find if there's recognition from both parties that there's a difference, it's a lot easier to work with because you can create some structure and some boundaries. If there's not recognition from, say, for instance, if you were the saver, the more sort of considered one, and your partner was not, that is a bit harder. The one thing that I'm very, very adamant about when it comes to women and finances is have your own bank account and have your own stream of income, and try to limit the communal money as much as possible, or make it very clear what things are for. So there's this fund is for children activities or whatever. This fund is for groceries. This fund. So it's about trying to create the structure to support things. Give them a slush fund as well, so they don't feel too constrained. Because I find any of us, it's a little bit like being on one of these really severe diets. You have blowout days. I was like, well, if it's a sustainable diet, you don't really need a blowout day. And then the blowout day just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then it goes over days and days and days. So build in a slush fund or a fun fund around all of that as well, so that there is there's some guilt-free spending, but it's that realization or that acknowledgement first, and then you work from there. Does that answer your question and help?
Yeah, thank you.
No worries. But yeah, I do see this. I do see this quite often. And then when I quite often I'll do value sessions, and if someone's got a partner they're not as aligned in the money space as they are, I'm like, bring them along and we'll do the value session together. And quite often they'll learn something about each other, and they'll be like, oh my gosh, that's why you're like that. And you'll be like, oh my gosh, that's why you're like that. And you're just like, right, I get that. It's a little bit like whenever you do these profiling things, like whether it's human design or whatever, it creates a level of understanding that kind of gives you something to work with. It doesn't fix the problem, but it just creates an awareness and perhaps a little bit more of an understanding and acceptance than anything. Because again, if somebody's not used to having money, they will manifest not having it. So they'll spend it, or they'll lose it, or something will happen so that they'll never have money. Even when they get it, they'll lose it. So it's then trying to deal with the why and the mindset and the energetics behind that. But that is harder to do for somebody who's not necessarily on the path of wanting to know it or fix it. All right. Any other questions anyone has?
Okay. It's not so much a question, but just I guess it's just been really interesting because like I think about mindset. I'm not sure if other people feel the same, but I think of mindset about you know, what I'm thinking about myself on a personal level, or my thoughts about running my business. But I think it's really useful to get like it's got me thinking now, like, what's my mindset about how I think about money. Like, you know, when you said think of maybe 3 negative beliefs that we've got, that's just something I guess that I've never really thought deeply about. And now I'll probably be a bit more self-aware of that. Yeah, so I thought that was quite interesting.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, because we say stuff without even thinking about it. I remember it was probably only a year or two ago where there's that saying, you know, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. And I used to say that for years without really even thinking about the words. And then when I spoke the words, I thought, what? I don't want to kill a bird. I certainly don't want to kill 2 with 1 stone. Like where did that even come from? But I hadn't thought about it. And yes, we can go a little bit into analysis paralysis with some of this sort of stuff, but it's still important, the words that we use, and then the beliefs that we have. You know, the languaging we use will belie the beliefs as well. So they'll underlie what that is. And then you can start to question them when you are aware and conscious of it, and you start to question it. So yeah, that is a big thing. Okay. Well, if there, like I said, you can always send me messages and ask other questions. I'm just going to quickly recap what we went through, which was a bit, but we looked at the concept of what money is and the mindset behind money and how that actually is built. Because I find when we just talk about so the stories and that sort of thing, we don't really understand, well, how does it actually get formed? Because then we can start to interrupt that formation cycle. And then we looked at beliefs and then the habits that link on the back of those beliefs, and then what to do about them. And some of that will take a bit of time and thought and writing it down as well. And very importantly, coming from that place of love, because we can be very judgmental, but with ourselves. You're like, oh, I can't believe I did this. I had a client who came to me and she was talking about what her and her partner had spent their $10,000. You know, during the pandemic, you could take $10,000 out of your super. And she's like, and we spent it on this and this. And I was like, and I looked at her, and her body language was like, yes, I know. And you could just see the level of shame that was there. I said, look, it's done. Let's, you know, whether it was or wasn't the right decision now, at the time it felt it. So let's just move forward from that. And it's very much about going, okay, well, I have more knowledge now than I did then. And I would have done something differently, but I'm now where I am. So let's just use the learnings and move forward. Because if we constantly stay in self-condemnation, we're never going to move forward, and that energy will always be heavy. So we'll never get where we need to go. So it's just, yeah, it's never going to help us. So that's
Arthur,
yes.
Arthur, what would you suggest when within the couple, one of the, either the male or the female, always, you can tell as soon as you start to talk about money, the body language tightens up. The other person just doesn't want to discuss it. And so you start off with this absolutely negative energy and in the atmosphere. Have you got any suggestions for that?
Yeah. So shining, I suppose not shining a light on it, but just sort of talking about your own discomfort as well, and not necessarily making it about them and their problem. And sort of going, okay, well, I'd really love us to talk about this. And I know it's an uncomfortable topic, and we've both got our stuff to work on. Can we put some time aside? Because I know my husband has this habit of attacking me with things that are really important to him at 11 o'clock at night when I'm exhausted and I'm about to head to bed. So I said to him, look, can we just talk about this? So we literally scheduled time in our calendars at a certain time on a day when it was going to be best for both of us, when we both had more energy and we were both prepared. And it was that mutual agreement where we're like, let's talk about it then. And if you want specific things to talk about, you can say, okay, I'd really love to talk about this. And it's not, if it's spending, for example, it's non-judgmental. It's like, I'm not judging what you're spending it on, and I'm not trying to control what you're spending it on. I just really love to talk about the amount we're spending and how perhaps we can both work together on what our goals are for money and how, like, why it's happening, and start to sort of investigate it in a way where it's very question, so very Socratic in terms of asking those questions and making it not confrontational. Because as soon as you say the word you, oh my goodness, it's a little bit like when somebody's upset and you're like, calm down. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's like red flag to a bull. You don't tell somebody who's upset to calm down. Well, at least not me. You don't tell me to calm down when I'm upset, because it'll have the complete opposite effect. But it's very much trying to keep that neutral and not judgmental and not accusatory as well. So that's how I would approach it. But create the time and space for it when the kids aren't there, when you've got no other distractions, when you can, and in a nice space. So maybe on the couch. Don't do it like in a, face to face with a desk in front of you, because there's automatically a break in energy, and there's a little bit of a I'm having a business meeting kind of feel to it. So it might even be, and I probably would, I know I've read the Barefoot Investor book, and he's like, I'll have date nights where you do it. And I was like, I wouldn't be doing that over dinner, because suddenly dinner gets associated with an unpleasant, uncomfortable conversation. I don't want that to be tainted. I do it in a different way, like sitting on like with my husband and I had something difficult we had to talk about, and we just sat on the couch and just kind of made it a little less intense and a little less formal. Or sit outside, fresh air, some sunshine. Then you got tweeting birds and some nature around you to help add to the energetics as well. So that would be my suggestion.
Thank you.
Cool. These are really good questions. I'm gonna stop the recording though.